You know the feeling, right? We've all been there. You've got that huge project looming or that really important exam, and suddenly cleaning the entire house seems like a fantastic idea. Yeah, putting things off is pretty universal, but it's way more than just a bad habit. It actually has real, measurable cost to our ability to learn. So let's dive into the science behind why procrastination is so much more than just bad time management.
You know, most of us think about procrastination as just a simple failure to manage our schedule. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it entirely? What if it's less about the clock and way more about our emotions? This question is really at the heart of understanding the whole procrastination puzzle. Is it a logistical problem or is it a psychological one? Let's find out.
All right, so let's start with the appeal. I mean, why do we make this bargain with our future selves in the first place? Well, it's because in the short term, procrastination feels good. It's this huge sense of relief. But as we're about to see, that relief, yeah, it comes at a steep price.
So, to really understand this bargain, a couple of researchers, Diane Tice and Roy Baumeister, did something that was honestly pretty brilliant in its simplicity. They just followed a group of students for an entire academic semester, and they tracked their work habits, their stress levels, and their grades. This study gives us a fantastic, clear window into the life cycle of procrastination.
And here's what they found, and this is pretty wild. Look at the beginning of the semester. The procrastinators, they actually reported less stress. They're coasting, enjoying that freedom. But as the deadlines get closer and closer, you can see how the whole trend just completely flips. That early, easy-breezy benefit gets paid back with some serious interest in the form of much higher stress at the end.
And this really gets to the core concept of what researchers call mood repair. We're not procrastinating because we're lazy. We're doing it to avoid feeling bad, feeling anxious or bored or insecure about the task ahead. It's an immediate emotional fix, even if, deep down, we know it's a long-term disaster. So the key takeaway here, and this is huge, is that procrastination isn't a time management problem. It's an emotion regulation problem.
Okay, so we've established the emotional trade-off, but what is the actual, tangible price we pay when it comes to our learning? How does this seemingly simple act of delay manage to systematically dismantle the very process of effective study? So to really understand the damage procrastination does, we first need to know the golden rule of learning. It's called the spacing effect. For decades, cognitive science research has shown, without a doubt, that our brains learn and retain information way better when we space our study sessions out over time. It just gives our memory time to consolidate everything. It is, literally, the exact opposite of cramming.
So here's exactly how procrastination attacks that golden rule. It's a really simple chain of events. Step 1, you delay the task. Step 2, that compresses the amount of time you have left. Step 3, that forces you to cram everything in at the last minute. And then step 4, just like that, spacing, the single most effective tool for long-term learning, is eliminated. It's a direct, unavoidable consequence.
Oh, but it gets worse. It's not just about losing time for spaced repetition. Procrastination also robs us of the time we need for what's called metacognition, which is just the crucial process of thinking about our own learning. When you cram, you don't have time to plan your approach, to test yourself and see what you actually know, or to go back and revise what you got wrong. You lose all the high-level strategies that separate real, deep learning from just shallow memorization.
Now, let's connect this all back to that stress curve we saw earlier. That huge spike in stress late in the semester isn't just an unpleasant feeling. Nope. It triggers a cascade of biological changes in your brain that actively make it harder for you to think and learn effectively.
See, under ideal, low-stress conditions, our brains engage in what's called deep processing. That's when we connect ideas, we reflect, we problem solve. But when we're cramming under pressure, our brain switches to survival mode and we get surface processing. The goal is no longer to understand, it's simply to memorize enough facts to complete the task and make the stress stop.
So what's actually happening biologically? Well, high stress floods our system with hormones like cortisol. And cortisol has a particularly strong effect on the brain's prefrontal cortex. Now that's the sophisticated, rational part of our brain, the part that's responsible for executive functions like planning and self-control. It's basically the CDO of your brain, and stress is just banging on the office door, making it impossible to think straight.
And the result of that is a direct hit to our learning machinery. Our working memory, you can think of that as the mental scratch pad we use to hold information. It actually shrinks. Our attentional focus narrows to a tiny point, and our cognitive flexibility, our ability to think creatively, just declines. It's like the part of your brain that makes smart, long-term decisions just goes offline, right when you need it the most. We are literally less smart when we are highly stressed.
And this quote just puts it perfectly. Deadline stress tends to produce task completion rather than concept mastery. When we're under the gun, the brain's priority shifts. It's no longer about mastering the concept, it's all about completing the task, just to make the pressure stop. Sure, you might pass the test, but you probably won't remember much of it a week later.
Okay, but before we reach a final verdict here, it's really important to add one layer of nuance. Because research suggests that not all delay is created equal. The story is actually a little more complex.
You see, researchers distinguish between passive and active procrastination. Passive is the classic version we've been talking about this whole time. You avoid the task out of anxiety and you feel kind of paralyzed. Active procrastination, though, is different. It's an intentional delay, usually by people who feel like they actually prefer working under pressure. And while the research is clear that the damaging effects on learning are almost entirely linked to that passive procrastination, it's still a fascinating distinction.
So, let's bring it all together now. What is the final verdict on procrastination and its real cost to our brains? Well, it's a clear and pretty predictable chain of consequences.
And here it is, the whole consequence cascade. It starts with that single act of mood repair, procrastination. That leads to compressed study time, which then spikes our stress levels. That stress forces us into using less effective, surface-level learning strategies. And the final result is exactly what you'd expect, lower long-term retention of the material. You can see how every single step just logically follows the last.
So if there's one single thing to take away from all this, it's this. The real damage from procrastination isn't laziness, it's theft. It steals the time we need for distributed practice, that spacing effect, and it steals the calm, low-stress conditions our brains require for deep reflection and true understanding.
So we've seen that procrastination isn't a character flaw. It's an emotional management strategy that just happens to have some serious cognitive side effects. And understanding that, well, that's the first step. So the real question is, now that you know the why behind the habit, what's your what next?